The Ascension is a New Age phenomena. While the Golden Age is an Old Age phenomenon. The Ascension itself predicts we will ascend into a planet of a higher consciousness and vibration, hence into a planet of love, peace, and benevolence. The coming of the Golden Age is predicting exactly the same thing. Our last Golden Age, when we were a planet of love, peace, and benevolence, was 11,500 BC. If history repeats itself, and that is exactly what the experts are saying, then we are in for a glorious future. In this video, we will present what that magic formula was back in 11,500 BC that created this heaven on earth. This is not conjecture, but actual facts presented by leading experts in the fields of ancient history, ancient cultures, archaeologists, and geologists. Are we entering a new age, or quite simply returning to the old age by tapping into the wisdom of our ancestors? The Mayans and the Egyptians are two of our most prominent ancient cultures that offer us this magic formula. We can correlate the prophecies of seers of Vedic times, the esoteric of Mayan civilization, and the works of integral yoga of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother to create life divine on earth. With scientific proof from the new avenues of quantum physics, positivism is the essence of quantum physics. It is the physics of possibilities. So let us all open up to new possibilities and unleash our highest potential in our field of expertise. This will outpour creative juices to actualize the highest possibilities, to co-create a loving, happy, illuminating, and peaceful age. The new age with synergy in all facets of our social arena to co-create the golden age on earth. We are humbled and honored to present the magic formula from a single source. We are presenting clips of the 4th and 5th episodes of a 5-part series called The Pyramid Code. We highly recommend people watch this series in its entirety if you would like to unlock the secrets and knowledge of our ancestors. You will see we are in the ascension to this new golden age that started December 21st, 2012. Stay tuned as our experts explain these stages of evolution in glorious detail.
Our understanding of ancient Egyptian culture is limited. Looking at the artifacts left behind by the ancients, it is obvious that they had different values, customs, and beliefs from ours today. History books are filled with stories of war, invasion of territories, and patriarchal ways of being and thinking. Yet it seems that ancient Egypt enjoyed long periods of peace and prosperity, and a profound connection with nature and spirit. Is there a way to understand the shift?
So what we refer to as history that began some 6,000 years ago is really the advent of a different style of social organization that's typified by hierarchies of dominance, warring deities, warring mythologies, and control systems.
Vedic culture from ancient India speaks of a grand and measurable cycle of 26,000 years, consisting of ascending light ages and descending dark ages.
In the higher ages, you see this philosophy of living in tune with nature. People talk about speaking with the gods and a lot of interaction. Virtually every ancient culture has stories about the gods if you go back far enough. And you see a lot of matriarchal cultures if you go back far enough. You know, the Dark Age times, you have this very brutal, paternalistic type of ruling.
Has world culture always been male-dominated and patriarchal? If not, what would a matriarchal system look like? Matriarchy is not the opposite of patriarchy, with women dominating and controlling men. It is based on balance between the masculine and feminine, and harmony with nature.
All you can do is go back into the old kingdom, and what you find is, is obviously a fair amount of equality. The goddesses are revered as reverently as the gods, and there's even the instance, for example, of Hathor, the exception, in that she's the only deity that has a temple column all to herself. So the Great Mother, the great feminine principle, occupies a very important part in the whole Egyptian symbology, the whole Egyptian doctrine.
In our culture, we've practically erased the feminine in favor of the masculine. Reading, writing, and arithmetic. Art, music isn't as important. And our society is completely unbalanced because of it. The ancients knew that you could not achieve high states of consciousness without these being in balance. And so they revered the pure qualities of either. And so when we say sacred feminine and sacred masculine, this was the highest form of respect, so that the female would have both feminine and masculine balanced within her, and the male would have both feminine and masculine balanced within him.
As ancient Egypt slipped into patriarchal ways of being and thinking, the old spiritual ideology became codified, and organized religion became dominated by the Amun priesthood.
The Amun priesthood had a lot of power, and they were in a position to have people pay for their salvation. It used to be that your heart was weighed against a feather of truth, but in later pictures of the ceremony of the weighing of the heart, you'll see Horus holding onto the scale, and you could pay the priesthood for Shakti dolls, and the more of them you had, the more likelihood you could buy the lightness of heart instead of being light of heart. Well, this is a fundamental change in terms of how to live well, and I think that we still are living in that way.
History is written by its victors, and as the patriarchy took hold, much effort was put into suppressing Egypt's matriarchal past. We may never know how the high courts of ancient Egypt were run. It seems likely that the stories passed down through the patriarchal institutions of the 19th and 20th centuries may have misled us. The peace and prosperity of the 18th dynasty, particularly in the time of Hatshepsut, Nefertiti, and Akhenaten, had to do with honoring the feminine in balance with the masculine. Looking at Egyptian artifacts and frescoes, it is clear that the feminine principle played a prominent role in society and was cherished and revered. The feminine principle was articulated in the concept of a great mother, who was central to the ancient Egyptian worldview and was echoed by other world cultures.
The Milky Way in the sky is mythologized in various ways, in various traditions, in various cultures around the world, and it's often thought of, almost universally thought of, as a great mother principle, the great cosmic mother in the sky.
In ancient Egypt, biology met cosmology, and both were considered sacred.
When you look at the cosmology in terms of biology, is describing events that happen inside of a womb. And the womb happens to be the womb of the mother goddess.
In both Mayan and ancient Egyptian cosmology, the center of the Milky Way galaxy is where stars are born. Metaphorically, it is the womb of the great cosmic mother, represented as Isis, giving birth.
We keep looking at how the ancient Egyptians thought, and everything fed biology and procreation. How we got here, how we came into existence, biology, and then how we left, and how our soul continues to live. And we can see that there aren't really that many symbols that aren't pertaining to balance of the body, mind, and emotions, and to balance between the two hemispheres of the brain. Once we can embrace that, then it's easier to understand the Egyptians.
That switch from matriarchy to patriarchy, I think it's the cause of what's on the world now of conflicts and disagreement and showing off power.
We are trapped in our own concept of time, but many cultures think on a vastly different scale. Science has established that the earliest human remains are about 2.5 million years old. It has shifted our marker back, so that now we are able to conceive of human culture being much, much older. In Indian traditions, and in 30 other cultures, a 26,000-year cycle is accepted. How does that affect the traditional chronology of Egypt, which insists that the pyramids were constructed as recently as 2450 BC? Will this force the issue of rethinking the chronology of ancient Egypt?
The Egyptians themselves, in at least one stone tablet, the Palermo stone, and one papyrus, the Turin papyrus, they say that ancient Egypt is much, much older than the Egyptologists think it is. So to dismiss that is, of course, an assumption that contemporary Egyptologists know a lot more about ancient Egyptian history than ancient Egyptians do, which is a form of typical arrogance on the part of the academic community.
Modern scholars tend to minimize the age because it fits better with the current paradigm of history. You know, the current paradigm is 5,000 years ago, man was hunter-gatherer. He had to have writing before he could build large structures or civilizations. He came together to protect himself from other warring parties and things like this. And so, for example, in Corral, Peru, when they found that amazing six-pyramid structure down there, they assumed it was built by the Incas, because that's only 500 years ago, and the Incas built most of South America. Well, when they got this very good carbon dating that shows it's 4,700 years old, it really blows a hole in current history theory. Generally, the academic community is just sort of silent about it right now because they don't have any good ideas with the current theories of history.
There's a certain science of cycles that's embedded into the world age doctrine of the Maya. You find it nicely paralleled in Egyptian ideas as well as the Hindu world age doctrine known as the Yugas. And it's somewhat counterintuitive to what we've learned in our own Western education, that it's referred to as the myth of progress, that human beings today are in all ways superior to human beings that came before. It's simply not true. Cycles go through periods of increase and periods of decrease. It's really a beautiful and profound way of conceiving time. And in my research, as I've looked at Izapa, the origin place of the 2012 calendar, I've been able to see how the Mayan wisdom, it's not just some provincial belief system of a forgotten people. It actually is like a little doorway that opens up into the great spiritual insights that all of the great traditions share. In Egypt, in India, Islam, all the world's great spiritual traditions share these same universal, eternal spiritual principles. And it has to do with cycle endings.
Just like the cycles of birth, life, and death, within the 26,000-year cycle, referred to as the Great Year, there are extended periods of darkness and light. These are divided into distinct ages, known as the Golden Age, the Silver Age, the Bronze Age, and the Iron Age.
The ancients themselves told us that history, mankind would go into a dark age. 4,000, 5,000 years ago, they view the past as the Golden Age. They see themselves moving into the Dark Age and they dread it because they know that things are going to get worse, they're going to get chaotic. Cultures all around the world are talking about this pre-Dark Age, that things are going downhill.
I really ascribe to the Mayan and the Hindu idea that the Golden Age, the time of connection into the divine wisdom, was actually a long time ago. And we've been moving through periods of increasing densification, increasing alienation from the spiritual light.
Golden Ages are times of enlightenment, when civilizations reach high points in architecture, spirituality, and benevolence. This is considered to decline slightly in the Silver Age, further deteriorating in the Bronze Age, and reaching extreme levels of chaos, corruption, and ignorance in the Iron Age or Dark Age. Then the cycle works its way back up to the next Golden Age.
Those of us that are seriously looking at this old Vedic concept of the world ages, the cycle, we know that the Golden Age, the last Golden Age, basically the peak of the cycle was about 11,500 BC, highest point. The end of the Golden Age and the decline into the falling Silver Age, or what we would refer to as Mental Age, marked the time at which we were falling out of a state on this planet where the average person had the potential or capability to be in a state, a very high state of awareness. And they were a far more enlightened and benevolent society than we would be able to even imagine now, but they were beginning to lose that almost divine state that exists in the Golden Age. And as they started to descend into the Silver Age, there began to be more of an emphasis on what we would now refer to as sacred sites and sacred structures.
You could almost think of them as machines to enhance consciousness or to create an environment where, you might call it altered states of experience, but changes in consciousness, expansion of consciousness.
What these were really intended to do, it wasn't so much for the selfish purpose of, for example, boosting up a few individuals. This actually had to do with a much larger global perspective. And that's effectively what the Great Pyramid was. It was basically a device, a generator for, if you will, broadcasting and transmitting throughout the planetary structure, a type of field which uplifted the entire humanity.
This is very real, and I think this is very important. It's like great art or great spiritual insight, expansion of consciousness. In a way, there's nothing more important than that.
It couldn't do it forever because eventually Mother Nature is going to win out, and this cycle is part of nature. It's as much a part of the natural world as day and night are. We have the ability to grasp those electromagnetic forces and the more fundamental forces that underlie those to basically prop up humanity for a while using the system. Now the pyramids only have a very direct effect if you're close to them, which is the way it is in this age. If we go stand in the pyramid, we might feel an effect like that. But I suspect thousands of years ago, you didn't have to be near it. I think it was probably a global effect. The whole idea of the schools of mystery and the ancient knowledge and preserving those traditions that had come down from those fabulous ages, that was lost. And then eventually it was ridiculed, and then finally it had to go underground. because people would either actively burn those texts or, persecute the people who had that belief system. And I think at that point, we were in the Dark Ages.
So all signs point to the interpretation that we are deep into the period of increasing darkness. What happens at the end of that downward trend is a turnabout. And I believe that that's where we are right now in history. The Mayan material for 2012 basically indicates this turnabout point, this point of maximized spiritual darkness. But then in the cycles of time, we turn the corner and we have an opportunity to open up to the transformational energies that can sweep us into the next cycle.
I hope that the Mayan ancestors trying to interpret the few writings that are left are correct, that it means there's going to be some quickening or something like that. Because that would actually go with our latest understanding of the yugas. What a yuga cycle really is one precession of the equinox. And using these later scholars' interpretation, we're actually in the very early stages of consciousness accelerating.
It has to do with the opportunity that we have to open up to the divine wisdom, to the transformational energies. But it always comes down to free will. Nothing is predetermined. It always comes down to a choice that we all have to close down in fear, succumb to fear, close down, become more limited in our consciousness, or open up to the blessing of the connection to the higher wisdom that is symbolized in the Maya tradition by the galactic center, the womb of the Great Mother, that which can transform and renew.
Could the ancients have had it right? Perhaps we should consider that we too can return to high levels of consciousness, heightened perception, and inspired creativity. It would serve us well to embrace nature and to protect the planet's environment. Can we go beyond religious dogma and allow ourselves to imagine what lies beyond death? How would humanity change if, instead of material wealth, consciousness was our highest value? Or could it be a powerful gateway into new ways of being and thinking? Are we turning the corner and ascending out of the age of darkness to journey toward a new golden age? Is it possible that the ancients living in a golden age in the distant past were able to see into future cycles of time? Could they have predicted that humanity would plummet into the depths of collective despair? Could they have predicted that humans would be disempowered, thus losing their connection to spirituality? Did they leave magnificent structures skillfully aligned to the stars and encoded with symbols to act as a trigger for us to wake up now? Are we ready to walk forward into a new future?
Wake up! We have it. We got it. Just know that we have it. And it works.
The Pyramid Code was produced prior to 2012. We are now in the period of enlightenment. Will history repeat itself? It seems that returning to a masculine-feminine balance on the planet will be a major contributing factor. Can we use the last golden age as an example of how to live globally? Truly, it is about all of us walking in a good way. Actions of love, kindness, and benevolence. The video states that nothing is certain, we all have choices. It is our choices that molded history as it is today. Free will initiated out of fear is the one thing that can take us away from the planet reaching its highest potential. Keep watching our Ascension series videos as we all learn how to reach our own highest potential.